Good afternoon, everyone. Today is August the 2nd, 2021, and we are at a work session for the Salisbury City Council. First on the agenda is an update on the Chesapeake Utilities Corporation, the Somerset Natural Gas Project. Amanda Pollock, how are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is your monthly update from Chesapeake Utilities. So far, through the end of July, they're about 98% complete with the construction of the pipeline within city limits. So it could be that the update we give next month may be the last one for work within the city. I did want to note that in coordination on Rails to Trails, we do have a meeting scheduled next Tuesday with Chesapeake Utilities about the rail trail next to Evo. So we will have some more updates on that shortly.
Okay, awesome. Anybody have any questions? No, none on that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good afternoon. Next up, we have fortune-telling license legislation. Laura Soper. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Hannah Prue. I'm the communications intern for the mayor's office here. Today, we're here to talk about Chapter 5.28 of the City Code with fortune telling. It's been brought to our attention by a member of the community that the process of obtaining a permit is pretty extensive and expensive, as well as some of the language used in the code was outdated. So we are proposing to not only update that verbiage, but also to abridge the lengthy process, reduce some of the required fees and the charges and penalties for violations. And we think that these revisions will improve and benefit the community, especially for those who are seeking careers in fortune-telling practices, and it will also present this code in a fair, inclusive, and professional manner. Does anyone have any questions?
Just for the record, what are you looking to set the fees at?
So we have changed the fees from 1,000 to 100 for the background check. And this would be per year.
Any questions?
And that 100 is.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The fines that are listed there, are they commensurate with the other business fines in the same vein?
Yes, we've reduced those fines to align more with other communities and what they were doing.
No, but relative to businesses in our community, how do they compare?
Oh, yes, they do align.
Yeah, so they're very similar to our mobile vendor licensing fees and our hotel fees, so, or the violations.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gregory?
And just to be clear, it's just $100 flat rather than the $3,000 total if someone were seeking all the fees that were previously associated, right?
Yes, just $100.
Ms. Jackson?
Could I ask a question? Why were the fees brought down from 1,000 to 100 from the beginning?
Well, a lot of other communities were at that or near that $100 range. So we wanted to lower it. It seems like it's a lot, but we wanted to lower it to not only align with them, but also to be fair and more inclusive for our community members, because $1,000 is a very hefty investment and can discourage others for pursuing that kind of career if they wanted to.
Do we have that many in that business? In the fortune telling business?
No, currently we do not.
But there are folks that are interested in getting it, and I think that's how the changes in this legislation came about. They brought this to our attention of how expensive it was and what a cumbersome process it was. So that's why we set about to make these changes to the legislation.
I didn't really hear you clear, Laura.
Sorry. We didn't have any licensees previously, But an active community member who was seeking this license brought this to our attention, and the cost of the license was really cost prohibitive. Previously, I think it was $1,000 for the license, but then an additional $1,000 for different types of fortune telling. So it could be up to $3,000 just for the annual license. So it was that community member that encouraged us to make these changes to the legislation.
Okay, and I kind of agree with what Jack said earlier too. Does this business fees and all the rest of the other rules and laws go along with the rest of the businesses?
Yes, yeah, it does definitely match some of our other licenses that my department oversees.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, was there any, I'm glad you're making changes to this, but I'm going to be honest. I think we should just scrap the entire thing from the books. I don't think it's necessary to have that. I think this, I know that they're doing it as a business. I think to some extent, and maybe our city attorney could weigh in, this borderlines a religious liberty thing to some people. So I'll support if everybody's supportive of going this, but I'm more in favor of eliminating it altogether.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. President.
Sure.
So just my thoughts on the matter. I lean in that direction as well. That in general, business regulation should be designed to ensure that a level of professionalism exists in each field, that public safety and health is protected, et cetera, and that, the significant amount of investment in code governing fortune telling would make you think that there's, an
They were
abundance
doing it as
of
a
fortune
deterrent
tellers.
50 years ago when
And-
they created this. That's what
Right.
they were doing.
But what I would say is by reducing the barriers to entry, I think we address the two competing issues out there. One that the barriers are so high it's out of concert with everything else in our code, and then two, that there is some question or concern, particularly from our police department, who has reviewed this as well, which is that when there is, inside of a home or in some setting where there's potential for manipulation or abuse or someone to be taken advantage of in this kind of relationship, that some ability to look back and recognize who is and who is not certified to do that work, and then subsequently having the ability to pull a permit, even if it was only $10 that was paid for the permit,
Yeah.
That at least creates some form of oversight that wouldn't exist if we got rid of it entirely.
Because this falls more in the realm of spiritual guidance in when you're looking at what this, tarot reading, palm reading, that's more or less what it is. Not much different than a church. And we don't do this for churches. And I know that there are churches in our community that has ATMs in the lobbies. So, and I'm the son of a pastor. And so I grew up in a church, and, even though it's a nonprofit business, I'll just stop there. Anyway, but it's not much different than a church for spiritual guidance. And we don't require this for churches.
Mr. Vice President, if I could.
Yes. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
I think we have to be careful here. And I think it's a fact that not many churches have been involved with nefarious things, that some have maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that there has to be some control. And I think the language that's been put in there in terms of what fortune telling, the definition, and also in the background check, I think is very important. And I think that that's necessary to protect our citizens. So I respectfully disagree with your opinion,
Yes.
and I will support this this legislation.
I think the difference here is one is a service being provided while the other is a religious. And this isn't going to stop people from doing tarot readings in their own homes for themselves or anything like that. This is just for those who are providing that service for others. So I think that's the difference. So that's where I see it.
Okay, all right, so we have consensus to move forward?
Yes.
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 We'll place this on next week's agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, Hannah.
Thank you.
Next up is the Summersgate, take my glasses off so I can read. Summersgate Amended and Restated Annexation Agreement. Amanda Pollock?
Hello again.
Hello.
I have a couple people joining me. This is Greg Stevens with Vantage Point Retirement Living and Brock Parker with Parker and Associates.
How you doing?
So we're here to discuss an annexation amendment request from Summersgate. Vantage Point Retirement Living is seeking to modify the terms of their annexation agreement. Their annexation agreement was from 2005, so it's very different than the agreements we put forward now. There's a particular statement in that agreement that's made development challenging for them beyond the first phase, and that is a statement that reads, a 750-foot portion of Johnson Road will be required to be relocated so that it intersects Snow Hill Road opposite Robbins Avenue. So that was in the 2005 annexation agreement. Then in 2007, the Department of Public Works interpreted that and put a requirement in the Public Works agreement that said that the developer could only build phase one of the development prior to constructing the road relocation. So essentially, that has resulted in this development stalling after phase one. It's been cost prohibitive for Vantage Point to be able to do the road relocation for a number of different reasons. So we've done some research into this, and we could not find that it is a requirement of State Highway Administration. We think that back in 2005, this was a requirement imposed by the city. So therefore, since it wasn't an annexation agreement, it's something that can come before council to be negotiated. Since recently, the city has been looking at older annexation agreements and bringing them up to our current annexation agreement standards. We had a meeting with Vantage Point recently to talk about doing that, and they are receptive to that and have written the letter that's enclosed in your package requesting that we consider that. So in this circumstance, we would modify their agreement, amend it and restate it, and remove the requirement to realign the road, and instead replace it with our typical development assessment that we have in all our annexation agreements. And as you all recall, just very recently with the Faith Baptist amended annexation agreement, we put tiers on that development assessment to try to incentivize quick development. And that is something they're interested in as well. So we've included with the memo the older annexation agreement as well as their plan, and I want to give Greg and Brock an opportunity to speak about what they're planning to do.
Okay, thank you. My name is Greg Stevens, as stated previously. So I'm the developer and owner of the Summersgate Senior Living Project off of Johnson Road. I've been out there for almost 15 years now. And the original language that was in the annexation agreement has been a problem for over 10 years. I think the issue is that the annexation agreement is very clear, and it says that as part of the annexation of a number of properties, of which Summersgate is one, there's a requirement that 750 feet of Johnson Road be relocated to align with Robbins Avenue. What it doesn't say is who pays for it. And so this has been a stumbling block over the years, because in the Public Works agreement that I signed back in 2007, I did agree that we would not proceed past phase one of Summersgate until the road was relocated. Although I think it's important to note that the issue of who pays for actually doing it is still an open issue. But the magnitude of this project has grown over the years. You know, probably you're talking about a $2 to $3 million project. If it's built according to the design that came from the State Highway Administration, when was that, Brock? About 5 or 7 years ago. So I think that the path that the city is going down now, where there's a fee in lieu, perhaps, of Summersgate paying to relocate that road. I think this works out well for everybody, because I think it gives the city funds to set aside to pay for that road if and when they ever want to do it. And it gives me the opportunity to move forward and finance a project. We talked to Amanda and Public Works Department about the concept that we have. The rest of Summersgate, we see changing from the single-family or the duplex homes that you see out there today to a assisted living community, plus apartments that are age-restricted or age-targeted to 55+. That'd be a second step. That's beyond what we're talking about here today, but we could talk about that if you wanted to talk about it.
Any questions?
Yes, I've got a couple. Looking at the verbiage here, I'm making an assumption that the original requirement for the road was done as a result of a traffic study. Am I correct, Amanda?
That could be. So we haven't found a ton of internal backup that justified why that was requested. And, you know, just to note, and we talked to Greg about this, when they develop, they will still have to adhere to whatever state highway is asking them to do as far as Snow Hill Road. So we're not saying there's going to be no requirements to do anything along Snow Hill Road, but essentially they shouldn't be city imposed. They should be based on what state highway is requesting to do. So there was potentially a traffic study, but we couldn't find that, nor could we find backup that really justified why that requirement existed.
Okay, and that sort of answers part, I think, of my second question. And it says, we propose to provide tiers to the development assessment that is tied for the speed for which the properties can be developed to incentivize fast development. Those normal requirements and reviews that we do, don't they always include traffic studies?
Yes, it could still potentially include a traffic study. They'll have to go back before Planning Commission. So there would
Right.
be Planning Commission or State Highway Administration could require a traffic study. So that is
Gotcha.
a potential that exists.
Good, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
No.
If I could, Mir. Greg, do you mind just going over a little bit of what those number of units and can you just talk out the potential build-out plan for the housing aspect of the development?
Sure. The new concept for Summersgate is in a map, and the remainder of the Summersgate parcel is what's indicated as Phase 2A and Phase 2B. And we had talked to Amanda a number of years ago about that aspect of the project. The assisted living project is currently, what shows on those plans is 110 units of assisted living and memory care units. As you probably know, assisted living communities generate very little traffic because virtually none of the residents in that building will be driving. Average age of folks in that building will be 85 plus. The balance under Phase 2B, what you're looking at there is 10 apartment buildings. Those are basically eight out of the 10 are 24-unit apartment buildings, and the two smaller ones are 12-unit apartment buildings. Those buildings are smaller to allow for some massing, so going from the one-story Summersgate homes to the three-story garden-style apartments, we thought that there's a transitional space that probably makes sense to kind of step up to something from 1 to 3 stories, which is why that's there. Those apartments, I think I said 208 units. Again, those would either be restricted to 55 plus or targeted 55 plus. I think we still would like to consider that right now. But the fact of the matter is that the people that would be living there, the concept is that there are people that don't need assisted living today that are looking to be located near an assisted living facility, have an apartment like any other apartment. There's a community center there on Phase 2B that would also include some kind of cafe dining services for those folks. We think it's a good complement to the assisted living and the memory care programs in the big building.
The one other thing I'd ask you to speak to is if I go back to a meeting we had almost 2 years ago now, probably maybe longer. One of the things you brought up as we were talking about demographics and sort of the declining median age in our area was that demand, or there was unmet demand for folks who were seeking age-restricted communities in our area. One, because products hadn't come online in a long time, so supply hasn't increased. And then two, as we have younger populations, moving mother-in-law, moving parents back into the area is something that you'd seen demand for. Can you speak to that?
Sure, and actually, I had a market study done recently for the assisted living building in particular. And interestingly, there's a significant demand in Salisbury for seniors, particularly old seniors. In my business, I've been doing this a long time. There are younger, older seniors, and there are older seniors. And that assisted living building will really cater to those people. The apartments that we talked about probably cater to the younger, older. If I had to throw a number at it, the assisted living building is probably 85 plus. The apartments would probably be 70 plus. And I can tell you that I am familiar with the Salisbury market after having been here for 25 years or so, operating Mallard Landing community for many years. There really has not been a new community built since Mallard Landing was built in 1998. So you have 23 years without a new senior living community in a market that has an aging demographic. I just think that the demographics are very compelling.
All right, thank you. So the next step would be to go to the Planning Commission.
So since they're already annexed, they have their zoning, so our next step, I wanted to get consensus, and then Michael will work with them on the annexation agreement. We'll come back at another work session to discuss that, and then we'll take a resolution to legislative session, if that looks good.
So we have consensus to move forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, next up is an update on the First Street house fire. So we're going to have Fire Marshal Eric Kramer and then Housing and Community Development Director Ron Strickler. And that's not Ron.
I'm in place of Ron today.
Dan Hogg, how are you doing? All right. Who's taking the lead on this?
I can
Got it?
start.
All right.
Good afternoon first. So this fire was back in the beginning of the year. We had unfortunately, two fatalities in the fire. Unfortunately for me, we don't have a whole lot of data on the actual fire itself. We're not doing fire investigations right now, and I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the state and was denied the information.
Who conducted the investigation on the fire?
State fire.
State Fire Marshal, okay.
So since then, we had a few meetings to try to determine how to move forward with either legislation or increased inspections. I think we settled on trying to get in the existing buildings we have now, the building stock, to do some fire safety inspections. To date, we've scheduled 4 inspections. We haven't had really any compliance at all with the tenants, so they're not letting us in. So, just to recap, I don't really have any data on the fire. I mean, other than what you hear, like rumors on the street. I can't get my hands on the fire report, and the inspections. Trying to get in and do the inspections with the consent of the tenants isn't working too good.
Give you a little more on the actual inspections. Of the 4 rooming houses, there was 25 units. We talked to 10 tenants, and we performed 2 interior inspections. And the tenants aren't really willing to, they're afraid of retaliation, so they don't really want us to do inspections.
We also found just Duran, Holder, the fire inspector that works for me, he found 2 violations, like smoke alarm in a common area and a fire alarm system that had some deficiencies. That it was a local fire alarm in one of the buildings, but we didn't get in any of the tenant living areas. So unfortunately, we don't have much.
Yeah.
We really don't have much for you.
I hope what this I hope what this does is illuminates for everybody in the room the challenges that the city is up against. One, powers to get in, and we've talked a lot about the effectiveness of some of those tools, administrative search warrants, et cetera, over the years, and then 2, the lack of cooperation from sister agencies. When we took over some of the facets of the fire marshal's office from the state and stood up our own, plan review, and construction inspection, et cetera, that enabled us quite a bit to control the future of the built environment in the city from a fire safety standpoint. But when it comes to understanding what went wrong, when it comes to fixing those problems from a policy standpoint, we're handcuffed when our fire marshal is handcuffed, and particularly, I think it's evidence of a really unhealthy relationship when even a Freedom of Information Act request is denied to a colleague, a professional, meaning in this case Eric. That's just really problematic, and it does not enable the city to adequately manage the building stock that will put at risk not only our citizens but also those that go into the building to fight a fire.
How many rooms were in this house?
There was 25 total.
25?
3 of the houses had 6 rooms and 1 had 7.
Okay.
And we did leave on every door, if they didn't answer, we left a copy of the minimum standards of livability, which we read along with Eric, and we made it easier to read, if you will. And we have a copy in Creole, Spanish, Korean, and then English. So.
If I could just add to what the mayor said, we're full steam ahead with building code enforcement, new construction, and really the last piece to the picture is, and this shines a light on it, is we're doing an awful lot of work on the built environment, watching these buildings go up, and we can't get any data on how we're doing. So every time there's a fire,
Yeah.
we can't really adjust code, we can't update codes, we can't make the code specific to the fire problem in Salisbury if we don't know what's going on. And myself, the fire department, the housing department, the building department, we all need the data just to assess how we're doing, how things are going, so.
Excuse me, I really couldn't hear you well. I'm gonna ask the question. So you're telling me that the state will not give you information on the buildings that are developments that are being built in our city?
We're unable to get the fire data. So we pretty much have 100% of the responsibility when it comes to new construction. It's the fire data. So if there's a fire in a building, number one, and it's the state obviously is busier than we are. They're only collecting a certain amount of data on the building, on the fire, what happened in the fire. They're to an extent, they're not here. They're looking just to see if there was criminal activity, and if there was no criminal activity, that's kind of where they end. So we don't get any data on how the building responded to the fire, how the people inside the building responded to the fire, and how the systems that we're permitting for installation, we don't have any data on how those are responding to the fire. So It's, the state's just not, we're not getting the data on what happened in the fire from the state. That's where we're lacking. What happened? What, you know, and the code side of it, was everything,
Up to code.
yes.
That's
It's
sad.
impossible for us to know that.
That's really sad, because those are the things that we should be looking for, because those are the things that are prevalent to, most of the house fires. Most of our house fires are not arson or just, it's code. It's because there's some of them, most of them that I've seen myself do not meet the requirements of our code. And I know this house on First Street definitely had a lot of code issues. And it's sad that the state just looks for criminal activity instead of looking at how our system are failing the citizens. It's really sad.
I agree.
Everything is not criminal. Everything could be, and it is criminal for real if a landlord is allowing his home to be used. And how many rooms did you say was in this house on First Street?
I believe there was, I don't know the answer, but I'm gonna guess around 8.
8 rooms.
8 rooms and one
Okay.
apartment, one apartment.
8 rooms, and I know you probably don't know how many people were in a room. But the fact of the matter, this was a house that burned up, and it was neglect. I don't care what anybody says. And we can't get the data. So then we need to try to find a way or press the issue of getting data or finding ways to get this data from the state, or seeing that they just don't go and looking for criminal intent, but looking for failures from landlords
Mr.
when it
Bode,
comes to
if
the
I may.
housing codes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, April.
Excuse me?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jake. Go
This
ahead.
is,
Let me calm down some.
May I? So the way is out there in front of us. There, a way at least. And a way would be for us to do the investigations ourselves. It would be to empower our fire marshal with the same powers that the fire marshal has everywhere else in the state where there's a fire marshal. And that would be the ability to do investigations. And now, what the implications of that are as far as staffing, training, things like that, you can speak to where the training is at, you versus Duran versus, and what else would be needed. But what I can say is, the way to get past this would be to say, that third function of fire marshal that we didn't take over originally. Again, because our focus at the time was pretty clearly on consolidating plan review functions and being efficient from a plan review standpoint. That's certainly an option now.
Jake,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, could I say something? I thought I heard, I don't know if it was Dan or the other gentleman that's sitting beside him, say that he went to a few houses and the tenants wouldn't allow him to come in to do an inspection. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
But these are some of the same people who are making complaints about their living conditions, but they won't let you in.
That's correct.
And that's another sad story. You're complaining every day via Facebook or calling me, but you will not let the necessary entities get into your places to make sure you are secure. I'm really upset. I've got two issues: the fire marshal, state fire marshal, and I have an issue with the residents or the tenants of these places that you've asked to let you in to make sure they are secure, and they didn't do it.
8 of the 10 that we talked to said they would call back to schedule an inspection, and none of them have called.
Well, I think it's important to note that these are week-to-week rentals. These folks have no protections. They could be kicked out at any point for any reason. So it's certainly understandable on why they feel somewhat caught in the middle. And it's a tough spot.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Eric. Eric, unless things have changed, isn't one of the requirements of the state fire marshal to find out point of origin?
Yes.
And we can't even get the point of origin?
I reached out for this particular fire, and the fire chief wanted a report from another fire that happened in the city, and we were just denied. We were denied a copy of the report. So yeah, essentially yes.
That's ridiculous.
It is. It really is. People lost their lives in those fires, and I think people have the right to know what happened and how it happened.
We'd like to know why it happened so that we can stop it from happening next time.
Thank you.
That's always been my goal as your fire marshal, is to not just to regulate, but to prevent the fires from happening. That's the goal.
Mr. Boda, can I ask one other question?
Sure.
Dan, how frequently have we, on a, whatever the issue, whether it's occupancy or, a complaint, how frequently have we pursued administrative search warrants?
We tried once and we were denied and told that we weren't able to get it because we weren't a police or fire agency. And that was under a prior judge. We haven't tried it under the new judge or with the new legal team.
So we amended the code to get administrative search warrant powers in there, and the reaction from the judge at the time, before whom I guess most of our applications would go, was nice try. Whether you put it in your code or not, I'm not gonna. Okay, and that was on the basis of not being a police or fire agency.
Pretty much, yes.
I wonder if it would take an amendment to our code, or or simply, the fire marshal being the applicant or being a co-applicant. I wonder if we couldn't try again in future complaint situations where there was a potential violation of the fire code, fire protection portion of the code, or I guess administrative search warrants appears in two places, right? It appears in zoning, and it appears in building and construction. So from a building and construction standpoint, I wonder if that's where you could be an applicant or co-applicant, and we could try that. I'm not sure. That might be something we have to send through the city attorney.
I mean, it might be, simply changing a process and trying it to see if it works, and if it does, then that could be the route to go. Question I have with apartment buildings and some of these rooming houses, I know that they're similar but different. But what are our requirements as far as regular fire inspections for apartment buildings?
We currently, there's no legislated requirement, but once a year we do the common areas of all the apartments in the city. So so that's a little easier. It's more palatable to the owners. We're not asking to go into
Apartments.
the private residence. We're essentially looking at a little bit of the means of egress, alarms, sprinklers, things of that nature. So we're getting that done as best as we can.
So did this particular building, did it have like a common area for ingress and egress? That would be...
Technically, I guess if you're renting a room, technically the hall would be the common area, but it's not something that some of these things, we're also operating kind of at an information deficit. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So there's rooming houses. Honestly, it's my fault, and I was upset when this fire happened. I was upset. I mean, I took it personally that someone died in a fire in the city, and that's when I really started looking at what can we do. And I didn't do enough homework to find out, are there rooming houses? Where are the rooming houses? We had the data we had. We knew, you obviously know that Mill Pond Village apartment, you know that's out there, but what we
I used
don't
to
know
live
is
there,
the
yeah.
rooming houses on, and we don't know, in Newtown and just other parts of the city, we weren't aware of them. We're starting to look at them a little bit harder now, but those are harder, the rooming houses, the houses that were converted to 3 or 4 apartments, they're harder to get into than the big apartment complexes.
So
Those are easy.
would that be something we would have to change in the code to include those to be treated like apartment buildings? Where it could, by code, it creates the need, because we're already doing it for apartment buildings. So is that something that we could at least gives us a foot in the door for the fire safety aspect of it? Is that something that's possible?
I think it's already in the code.
Okay.
Essentially, like our inspection model that's in the code basically says we're going to inspect based on a fire and life safety risk assessment. So we're looking at where people congregate, where people sleep. So yes, it's already in the code, the ability, but there's a legal fine line, if you
Yeah.
will, on that people have a right to privacy. So when we just knock on, even though we're the fire department, when we knock on your door and say, hey, we want to come in and make sure that you're safe, make sure your neighbor's safe, because the way you operate your apartment affects your neighbor, that's, I think, the problem. I remember years ago when the judge said, no, it was based on someone's Fourth Amendment right. No judge wants to be the guy to end up in a higher court, I guess. But so we kind of have the authority to do that. It's just hard.
Yeah.
While we have the authority, it's hard to get in. You have to ask for permission to get in.
Now, the rooming houses, do we do occupancy permits for them?
I mean, at this point, they'd be grandfathered in per se. They have to inspect, they have to register them annually and then pay for each unit.
Are they doing that?
Yes. Everyone that we know of, yes.
That's the problem, is not knowing kind of what's out there.
So part of the occupancy permit for a lot of these, they're required to have an inspection, or not necessarily, it's more of a voluntary.
Unless it changes. So if I have a single-family home and I decide that I'm going to start renting out the rooms in this, number one, I don't think the zoning code of the city would even
Which they
allow
can't
it.
do.
But if I was a fool and I said, I'm going to call the city and apply for a change in use and occupancy to go from a single-family home to a rooming house, then that would prompt, then we would do an inspection, and the building department would do an inspection. So
Or if a rooming house sold to a new owner that kept it as a rooming house, then we could get in there, right?
Correct.
But if it stays the same and it's grandfathered in, we're out of luck.
Yes, April?
Lord, I almost forgot what I was going to say. But, okay, the state fire marshal wouldn't give you a report. Who gives the report to the insurance company?
I assume that the insurance company would petition as a representative of the owner. They might have better luck with the state getting a copy of that fire report than I did. They're representing the owner of the property, so I'm not a lawyer. I would assume that would make it easier to get a copy of the report.
Okay, now they'll give a report. What you're saying, there's more of a possibility that they would give the report to the insurance company because they're a representative of the landlord. But they won't give a copy to the fire department or code inspectors, and we're the ones who are looking out for people's safety. Something's wrong with this picture.
Yeah, April, it's Jake. I can
Something's wrong with this picture.
I can shed some light on what I think is going on.
It's not even about the people's safety. I'm not saying the city.
No, it's not.
I'm saying between the fire marshal, the state fire marshal, the landlord, and the insurance company. It's not about the people. It's about money. And when it comes to people's lives are more valuable than any money. And something needs to be done, and we need to sit down and figure out how we can get past this, even if we have to go to the state to get something passed. This is what we have to do because we can't afford to keep losing people in house fires because of negligence of a landlord or negligence, period. And I'm upset. I'm really upset because lives were lost. And this is not the first time. It's happened numerous of times, and it's because of neglect.
So I think
And it's
we're-
like, to me, the state fire marshal just saying, okay, some lives are gone, and who cares? That's the way it appears to me. And we shouldn't, and the city shouldn't know anything about it. We have no rights. But these people are dying in our city.
I think what we, you have one path of us taking over the fire inspections or the fire investigations. I think that's something worth pursuing, because obviously we're not, the state's not being a partner in this. And so I think that's something maybe we can charge you to start drafting that, however we need to make that happen. Does everybody have consensus on that issue?
Yes.
The only thing that I would say before we get to that point, Mayor, is maybe we should contact our representatives and
Yes.
let them see if they can do something
Together.
in regards to these things.
Yes.
I think you're always better, in my opinion, at first, to try to go a soft route rather than a hard route. And I think that if we ask our representatives to go and see if they can give us some help and being able to get, and do it in a nice way, and I think they will, but we should have the right to understand in our district what the point of origin and whether it was an accidental, or if someone, and we know this has happened because I've been there in some situations where somebody's smoking in bed. The resident smoking in bed never wakes up, overcome by smoke, and dies. Well, that's as important to know as if there was a faulty switch or whatever. So I would think before we start messing with codes, let's see if we can get a cooperation and get especially on this fire, see if we can get their help in getting the copy so we can have a better idea maybe of how to word what we want.
I agree, Jack.
I do too. Maybe we could do something where a letter from the city signed by the council and the mayor. I don't know if that's something that would go
We
into
can
the.
do that, but I mean,
Or
we can just
just
we can just
reaching
call. So it's Shuri and Addie. So we can call Shuri and Addie, be their district.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it formal. I would do it like Jake says, let's give them a call and say, hey, look, we need your help.
Okay.
Start there.
Start there.
Simultaneously, we can make sure we know what the impact of the city would be if we were to take on those powers.
I would at least, investigate that route too, but let's try the other one and see if we can get assistance the other way
Okay.
first. And if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything further? Anyone on this? All right. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment to our city. We appreciate it. I know tomorrow night is National Night Out. What time is that tomorrow? Is that 5? 5 o'clock at the Salisbury City Park, correct?
Nope.
No, where's it at?
Newton Community.
Oh, Newton Community Center. Okay. Two different places. All right, so 5 o'clock at the Newton Community Center. Like to see everybody out at that. There will probably be a lot of people there. So if you are in a crowd like that, please wear a mask. Just so everybody knows, when you're going into some of the larger retail establishments now, such as Walmart, you're not required, but employees are now, but you're suggested to. So Wacomico is considered a at-risk county area on the CDC county by county list. So everybody, please do your part. Anything from the rest of the council? Jack?
To reiterate, we are now in substantial risk category, and please, if you have not been vaccinated, please get vaccinated. And if you're in a crowd, please wear a mask.
Ms. Jackson?
I would like to reiterate on our discussion just a moment ago, about our fire inspectors and our, housing inspectors coming to your homes and your residents and asking to inspect. Please let them in and let them inspect your houses. It's only for your benefit. It's only for your safety. You complain about issues in your homes, but then you won't let the people that are authorized to come in and do the job to come in. Please, it's for your safety. Also, I'd like to piggyback off of Jack, COVID. Be safe, wear your mask, govern yourself accordingly. I stopped wearing my mask for a while, but I started back wearing it because I'm kind of like leery. Get vaccinated. I do know August the 14th, at the VFW Post 10159, we will be having a clinic of vaccinations. And if I'm not mistaken, we will be doing testing as well. So if you haven't gotten your test, if you haven't gotten your vaccination, please meet us there August the 14th, or even make your own appointment to go wherever necessary to get your shot. Get your shot. Get your vaccination. Please get it. Save your life and others. Thank you.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I was going to say. You know, please get vaccinated. It's incredibly important. The Delta variant is out there, and it is highly, highly contagious, much more so than the previous variations of it. So please, please, please go get your vaccine and make sure you're being safe out in public.
Mr. Mayor, anything?
I think it's been covered adequately. I'll see you all tomorrow night at the Newton Community Center.
All right, thank you. With that, we are adjourned. Everyone have a good evening.
Good evening.